The galaxy was silent that night. Not the kind of silence you hear before sleep, but the deep, endless silence of space. Stars burned far away, ancient and distant, their light taking thousands of years to reach anywhere. Between them lay darkness, and in that darkness, something called out. It was not a voice. It was not music. It was a scream. The distress signal came from the edge of the Perseus Arm, far beyond the safe routes of trade ships. It was weak, broken, almost lost in the background. Noise of the universe, most sensors ignored it. But on the Galactic Council's main station, a board communications officer caught it in his scan. The message repeated again and again, carrying across light years. This is the Virex Dominion. We are under attack. The Devourers are here. We cannot stop them. Please, anyone, help us. The officer stared at the signal for a long time. He had heard of the Devourers. Everyone had. Even in the most civilized worlds, their name was spoken only in whispers. They were not raiders. They were not conquerors. They did not invade for resources or slaves. They came only to consume everything. Planets, moons, ships, even the life in the oceans. When they were done, nothing remained but ash and rock. The officer forwarded the signal to his superiors. By the time the message reached the council chamber, most members were already nervous. The Council was made of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful empires, tall insectoids from Zrith, the scaled warlords of Kraxus, the crystalline minds of Vath Prime. Their voices filled the air like storm clouds. "It's too far," one delegate said. "By the time we reach them, the Virex will be gone." Another voice, cold and certain. "No fleet has ever stopped the Devourers. If we send ships, we will only lose them too." "Then we do nothing?" a younger representative asked, his voice trembling. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. No one wanted to say it, but it was the truth. There was no hope. The Virex Dominion was already dead. But then, an old voice spoke. It belonged to Elder Sarah, one of the last living members of the original council. Her eyes were dim with age, but her words carried weight. "There is another," she said. The chamber stilled. "Not an empire," she continued. "Not part of the council, but I have seen them fight. Long ago, before most of you were born. When the Devourers came the first time, they were the ones who stopped them." A dozen voices demanded to know who she meant. Elder Sarah's mouth twisted into something between respect and fear. "Humans," she said softly. "The Deathworlders." The name rippled through the chamber. Some gasped, others laughed in disbelief. "Deathworlders are a myth," a delegate said. "No," Sarah replied. "They are real, and if the stories are true, they are dangerous, more dangerous than the Devourers themselves." The chamber erupted into arguments. Humans were said to come from a planet so hostile it killed the weak before they reached adulthood. Every animal, every storm, every disease fought to end their lives, and yet they survived. More than survived, they thrived. They learned to turn their dangerous home into a weapon, and then they took that mindset to the stars, but no one had seen them in over a century. They had refused to join the council. They had vanished into the darkness, building their own fleets, living by their own rules. "Even if they exist," one member argued, "why would they help us?" Sarah's voice cut through the noise. "Because if the Devourers are not stopped," she said, "eventually they will reach Earth." That made the chamber fall silent again. It took 3 days for the council to decide. The vote was bitter. Many feared contacting the Deathworlders would bring a new danger into the galaxy, but fear of the Devourers was greater. In the end, the message was sent, carried through deep space relays, passing abandoned star systems and forgotten battlefields. The message was simple: "Earth, we request your aid. The Devourers have returned. We cannot stop them. If you still live, we beg you to come." Then the council waited, and waited. 1 day passed, then 2. Some believed the message had been ignored. Others hoped it had been. On the 4th day, every comm station in the council network went dark for exactly 3 seconds. No one knew why. Then the systems came back online, and a single transmission appeared on every screen, every wall, every hologram. A human face, pale skin, cold eyes, scar across the cheek. He spoke only 3 words: "We are coming." Panic broke out in the council chamber. Some shouted for fleets to prepare in case the humans attacked. Others whispered in awe. Elder Sarah only closed her eyes. She had seen those eyes before, long ago on a battlefield no one wanted to remember. Across the galaxy, the Virex Dominion continued to send their desperate calls for help. Their fleets were falling one after another. Their homeworld was under siege. The Devourers had begun consuming its outer moons, and somewhere, far beyond the edge of known space, on a world most believed was abandoned, massive engines roared to life. Earth was moving. Beneath the surface of Earth, deep in fortified bunkers, the Deathworlders prepared. Old war machines, dormant for a century, powered up. Ancient ships, their hulls black as night, floated from underground docks into open air. The humans spoke little. They did not send promises or demands. They only read the coordinates, calculated the travel routes, and began to arm their ships. In orbit, a single warship broke free from its docking clamps. It was enormous, larger than the biggest council dreadnought, with armor so thick it could shrug off the firepower of an entire fleet. Its name burned across its side in white letters: Goliath. The ship turned toward the stars. Engines flared, and without ceremony, it vanished into faster-than-light travel. Back in the council chamber, tension grew. The Deathworlders had answered, but no one knew what they would do when they arrived. Would they help? Would they destroy? The stories said humans never entered a war without finishing it, but they also said humans never left a threat alive. The Virex Dominion? Time was almost gone. The Devourers had broken through their planetary shields. The sky above their world was black with swarm ships, each one spilling thousands of biomechanical horrors onto the surface. In their capital city, the last defenders fought in the streets, surrounded by walls of flame. The Virex Prime Minister recorded one final message, knowing it might never reach anyone. "If you hear this," she said, "we are lost. Save yourselves. Do not come for us." But even as her voice faded into static, another ship was already on the way. A ship from a dead world. A ship carrying soldiers from the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. A ship commanded by people who had once fought the Devourers and won. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but everything had just changed. And somewhere in the cold darkness, the Goliath sped toward war. Beneath the gray clouds of Earth, far under its mountains and oceans, machines that had slept for more than a century began to wake. Massive gears turned. Deep reactors rumbled with a low, endless growl. In the old military bunkers, sealed behind kilometers of reinforced rock, the Deathworlders prepared for war. The word Deathworlder was not something humans had chosen for themselves. It was given to them by others, by alien species who had visited Earth and never returned, or who had studied it from far away and decided it was too dangerous to land on. Earth was a world of violent storms, earthquakes, boiling deserts, and freezing poles. Its oceans hid creatures with teeth longer than a man's arm. Its skies carried lightning that could split stone. And yet somehow humans had not only survived here, they had thrived. They had learned to turn hardship into strength. Where other civilizations grew soft in safety, humanity grew hard in struggle. That was why, when the Galactic Council whispered their name, it was often in fear. But fear was not what moved Earth now. The signal from the Virex Dominion had reached them. The words "Devourers" and "Help" had been enough. Old commanders came out of retirement, called from quiet homes and forgotten stations. Soldiers left their families, their faces calm but their eyes cold. They did not speak of hope. They did not speak of peace. They spoke only of the mission. In the central command chamber of Earth's military core, deep beneath the Andes, holographic, maps filled the air with moving red marks. Each mark was a devourer fleet, each one a wound spreading across the galaxy. "The Virex will not survive the month," one officer said. "Then we move faster," the commander replied. She was an old woman with hair of silver steel and scars across both hands. Her name was Admiral Cara Vance, and she had fought in the last Devourer War. Few alive knew what that meant, but those who did understood why she was given the Goliath. The Goliath was not a ship built for defense. It was not a vessel for patrol or escort. It was a warship of extinction, designed in a time when Earth had been at war with half the galaxy, and victory had meant erasing an enemy completely. Its armor was thick enough to survive direct hits from planetary defense guns. Its engines could outrun almost anything. And its weapons, railguns that could tear moons apart, missiles that carried miniature black holes, beams that sliced through shields like paper, were all powered by a reactor that could run for centuries, without refueling. In the docking bay, engineers swarmed over the Goliath's black hull. Weapons were checked. Hull plating was reinforced. Ammunition bays were filled with warheads that had not been touched in 100 years. Above them, in the high observation deck, Admiral Vance watched in silence. She had no interest in speeches or ceremony. She had seen what the Devourers did to worlds, and she knew that time spent talking was time the enemy used to grow stronger. Far away, in the dark reaches of space, the Devourers were not waiting. They had never waited for anyone. Their fleets were living things, ships of bone and steel, covered in a skin of writhing black metal. They moved in swarms, thousands at a time, feeding on planets like locusts on crops. The Council might fear to face them, but the Deathworlders had no such hesitation. Back on Earth, training yards filled with soldiers in black armor. These were not the polished ceremonial troops of alien empires. These were killers shaped by a world that never forgave weakness. They moved like a single machine, silent except for the heavy thud of boots. Each carried a rifle as tall as their chest and wore armor thick enough to walk through fire. In the orbital dockyards, 3 smaller escort ships, still massive by Council standards, were prepared to follow the Goliath, but Admiral Vance refused them. "One ship," she said. "We go alone." Some of her officers disagreed, but they obeyed. It was not arrogance, it was strategy. A single Deathworlder warship could move faster, strike harder, and disappear before the enemy could gather. And besides, the Goliath was not just a warship, it was a symbol. In the Council chamber, alien delegates watched the long-range feeds of Earth's preparations. Some were impressed, some were afraid. A few began to wonder if inviting the Deathworlders back into galactic affairs had been a mistake. Elder Sarah, the old council member who had first spoken the human name, only smiled grimly. "You wanted salvation," she said to the others. "It will come, but you may not like the price." At dawn on the 7th day after the signal, the Goliath left its cradle. Its engines lit the sky over the Pacific Ocean, shaking the clouds into spirals. The shock wave rolled across the seas, and somewhere in the forests of South America, the ground trembled as if remembering an old fear. The ship rose higher and higher until the atmosphere could no longer hold it, then broke free into the cold black beyond. Admiral Vance stood on the command deck, looking out at the stars. "Course is set for the Virex homeworld, her navigation," officer said. "Estimated arrival in 6 days, 21 hours. "We'll make it in 5, Vance answered. Orders were given. Engines roared. The Goliath vanished into faster-than-light space. The Council would not hear from Earth again, until the battle began. But somewhere, deep inside the ship, in the quiet of the crew decks, an old piece of Earth history was painted on the wall. A phrase from centuries ago, from a time when humans fought wars only with each other. It said, "No mercy for the enemy." And for the first time in 100 years, the Deathworlders were going to war. Far beyond the borders of the Galactic Council, in a part of the galaxy where no civilized ship dared to travel, the Devourers moved like a storm of shadows. They were not a species in the way other life forms were. They had no culture, no art, no cities. They existed only to consume. Their fleets were vast and alive, made of bone fused with metal, their shapes twisting in the darkness like the bodies of deep-sea predators. Every ship pulsed with a slow heartbeat, as if the vessel itself was a living creature. Where they passed, the stars dimmed under their mass. The Virex Dominion had seen them first, and it had been the end of them. The first Devourer scouts had entered the system quietly, their hulls hidden in the shadows of comets. They had not attacked right away. They waited, drifting slowly, studying the defenses of the Virex homeworld. Then, without warning, they had struck. Their weapons were unlike anything the Council had seen. Streams of molten metal spat across space, clouds of nanomachines that ate through shields like acid, swarms of living missiles that screamed as they flew. The first Virex fleet had been wiped out in hours. The survivors ran, but the Devourers did not chase them. They didn't need to. The swarm spread, wrapping around the planet like a tightening noose. Their feeding began at the moons, stripping them of rock and metal until they were nothing but drifting dust. Then they moved toward the orbital stations, cracking them apart like eggs. Every ship they took was not destroyed. It was broken down, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the black alloy that seemed to form the Devourers' own bodies. On the largest of their ships, deep inside the central core, the Queen watched. She was the mind of the swarm, her thoughts echoing through every ship, every drone, every soldier. Her body was a mass of shifting black plates, her eyes two burning red orbs that saw across light years through the senses of her fleet. She remembered other prey from long ago, worlds that had fallen, races that had begged for mercy, empires that had been ground into dust. But she also remembered something else, a battle unlike any other. Ships that did not flee when her swarm approached, beings that fought with fire that burned even the void. The memory made her coil in anger. Those beings had hurt her swarm. Those beings had been human. The Queen had believed they were gone, wiped out or hiding forever. Yet now, she felt something moving in the darkness, something fast, something strong. Her thoughts spread through the swarm, and thousands of ships shifted course to meet the approaching threat. On the Virex homeworld below, the skies were black with enemy shapes. The last defenders fought in the cities, but it was hopeless. Every building destroyed fed the swarm's endless hunger. Oceans boiled where Devourer harvesters drilled into the seabeds to pull out minerals. The very air began to taste of metal and smoke. In the capital, the Prime Minister gave her final order. To the Planetary Defense Command, hold as long as you can. Buy time. She knew no help was coming from the Council. They feared the swarm too much. But perhaps somewhere, some power would answer. In the deep void between stars, the Devourer scouts detected a ripple in faster-than-light space. Something was coming toward them. At first, they thought it was a Council ship, another doomed rescue attempt. But the readings were strange. The object was huge, larger than any known vessel, even the massive carriers of the Craxus warlords. Its energy signature was unlike anything in their archives. It was silent, but it moved with precision, not wandering like a lost patrol. The Queen extended her senses toward it and felt something she had not felt in 1,000 years, Rage, not the cold hunger of her swarm, but a focused, burning rage. The object kept coming. The Queen sent a group of hunters to intercept it. 10 ships, fast and armed for killing. They vanished into faster-than-light corridors to ambush the target. When they emerged, they found only darkness. The target had changed course in the split second before they arrived, avoiding them completely. The Queen narrowed her burning eyes. This was no prey that stumbled blindly into her net. This was a predator. On the edge of the Virex system, the swarm tightened its defenses. Massive guardian beasts, half creature, half warship, took positions around the main feeding fleet. Every weapon was primed, every drone armed. The Queen spoke through the minds of her soldiers. "Let them come, we will feed on their bones." But deep inside her own mind, behind the layers of hunger and fury, there was a sliver of unease. The last time she had faced these predators, she had lost. And she knew this. Time, they might not be here to fight her. They might be here to end her forever. The edge of the Virex system was silent when the Goliath emerged from faster-than-light space, its massive black hull blotting out the stars behind it. For a moment, it simply drifted, its engines dim, its weapons cold, like some ancient predator, rising slowly from the depths. Inside the command deck, Admiral Kara Vance stood with her hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the forward display. Around her, the crew moved with quiet precision, their voices low, their faces hard. They had already run the numbers, already calculated the odds, and they knew that this was not a battle they were here to survive. They were here to win, no matter the cost. Far ahead, the swarm waited. The Devourers had formed a wall of living ships between the humans and the Virex homeworld. Hundreds of smaller predator craft darted through the gaps, their movements quick and sharp, while massive hive ships floated like black mountains, their surfaces writhing with drones. In the center of them all, hidden behind layers of living, armor and shielded from long-range scans, the Queen watched. She had felt the humans' approach for days, their presence pressing against the edges of her mind like a cold wind. Now she studied the single warship before her, confused. One ship. Not a fleet, not an armada. Just one vessel coming alone into the heart of her swarm. Arrogance, she thought, or madness. In the council chamber, light years away, alien delegates watched the live feed transmitted by hidden observation drones. Some whispered in disbelief, others in awe. "One ship will not survive," a Craxus warlord muttered, his clawed hand tightening. Elder Sarah said nothing. She simply leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. The Devourers moved first. A wave of hunter ships broke from the swarm, their jagged hulls glinting in the light of the system's dying star. They closed the distance quickly, their weapons spitting molten streams across the void. On the Goliath, the crew made no move. To dodge. The shots slammed into the ship's outer shields and dissipated into nothing. A few officers glanced at Admiral Vance, waiting for the order to fire, but she remained silent, watching. The hunters came closer, their teeth-like prows opening to release swarms of biomechanical boarding drones. Still, the Goliath did not fire. The silence on the bridge was so complete that every creak of the ship's hull seemed loud. Then, as the first Devourer ship entered optimal range, Vance gave a single nod. "Broadcast," she said. Across the system, on every frequency the Devourers used, on every open channel the Council drones could detect, a human voice rang out, deep and steady. "Run!" The hunters hesitated for the briefest moment, as if the meaning of the word reached some ancient memory in their minds. Then they surged forward again, their hunger overcoming the flicker of fear. Vance's next word was not spoken to the enemy, it was to her weapons officer. "Fire!" The Goliath came alive. Its railguns spoke first, hurling tungsten slugs. At near-light speed, each impact tearing straight through the Devourer ships as if their armor were made of paper. Dorsal beam cannons followed, slicing through targets with burning lines of white light. Missiles streaked from hidden bays, each carrying warheads so powerful that when they detonated, the shock waves rippled visibly through space. The first wave of hunters ceased to exist in less than 10 seconds. The swarm reacted instantly. Thousands of ships moved at once, a black tide surging toward the human warship. From a distance, it looked like a living shadow spreading across the stars. On the Goliath, targeting systems screamed with new contacts, but there was no panic. The crew worked like one mind, shifting firing arcs, recalculating weapon cycles, managing shield power. The ship's hull glowed faintly as its armor absorbed energy from incoming fire and redirected it back into the reactors. In the swarm's core, the Queen felt the loss of her hunters and understood, at last, that this was no ordinary prey. Memories returned, battles fought against these same creatures long ago, battles she had lost. Rage flared through her mind, and she commanded the swarm to attack without restraint. The Virex homeworld below watched the sky erupt in fire. Citizens huddled in ruins, saw streaks of light cut through the darkness, heard the distant thunder of orbital destruction. For the first time in weeks, the ships in the sky were dying, and they were not Virex ships, but the battle had only just begun. The swarm began to circle, trying to cut off the Goliath's escape, but Vance had no intention of leaving. "Push forward," she ordered. "We're going through them." The Goliath's engines roared, throwing the massive vessel forward, like a spear through the heart of the swarm. Everywhere it passed, Devourer ships broke apart, their remains pulled into the gravity wells of their dying comrades. The Queen ordered her hive ships forward, massive fortress vessels capable of swallowing whole cruisers, but the Goliath's main spinal cannon fired, releasing a beam of energy so bright it left afterimages burned into the eyes of those watching from afar. The beam punched through the first hive ship, then the second, leaving them hollow, burning shells. On the Council's live feed, the room was silent. The alien delegates had no words for what they were seeing. One human warship was tearing apart, the most feared force in the galaxy, and it had not even taken damage. On the bridge of the Goliath, Vance's voice was calm, but her eyes burned. She knew this was only the beginning. The swarm was massive, far larger than what they could see here, and somewhere ahead was the Queen. And for humans, this was never about winning one battle. It was about ending the war. As the Goliath cut deeper into the swarm, its black hull, lit by the burning wrecks of its enemies, the Queen's voice echoed through the minds of her swarm. "All forces, destroy them." But there was a flicker in her mind, a memory she could not push away, of fire, of defeat, of the same eyes, that now stared at her from across the void. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Queen felt fear. The battle in the Virex system became a storm of light and shadow as the Goliath drove into the heart of the swarm. Space burned with explosions, each one tearing apart another piece of the Devourer's endless fleet. The human warship moved, with a speed that seemed impossible for its size, its engines leaving trails of blue fire across the void as it spun and shifted to bring its weapons to bear. The swarm pressed from every side, but every time they thought they had surrounded it, the Goliath would turn, split their formation, and tear through the gap with devastating firepower. Inside the command deck, Admiral Cara Vance stood like a statue, her voice calm as she issued orders. "Bring the starboard railguns to full power. Overcharge the dorsal beams. Target the largest signatures first." Her crew obeyed without hesitation. They were Deathworlders, born from a world where hesitation meant death. The railguns fired, each slug traveling so fast it tore holes through multiple enemy ships before burning out in the distance. Beams of concentrated energy, lanced through the swarm, cutting hive ships in half. Missiles streaked from hidden launchers, each one smart enough to weave through incoming fire before striking at the exact weak points of the enemy's living hulls. Every detonation painted the darkness in white light. To the observers watching, from the Council's hidden drones, it looked like a single ship was dismantling an entire army. But Vance knew the truth. This was only a fraction of the Devourer's strength. More were coming, and somewhere ahead, the Queen waited. In the swarm's core, the Queen raged. She felt every loss, every ship burned away, every drone's mind going silent forever. She had fought humans before, but she had not remembered their strength clearly. Now the memory returned with brutal clarity. How they struck not like prey but like predators. How they hunted without fear. How they destroyed without mercy. Her rage boiled over, and she ordered the release of the Leviathans. From the depths of the swarm came shapes so vast they blotted out the stars, creatures fused with machinery, each the size of a small moon. Their bodies were covered in thick armored plates, their tentacle-like limbs tipped with claws that could slice a battleship in two. Their mouths were rings of spinning metal teeth, and deep inside each one was a reactor core stolen from the civilizations they had consumed. The council feed caught the first sight of them, and the chamber erupted in panic. "Nothing can kill a Leviathan," one delegate gasped. Elder Sarah only watched in silence, her eyes locked on the screen. On the Goliath, Vance saw the new threats appear on her display. "Arm the starfire cannons," she ordered. The crew obeyed without question, sealing blast doors around the lower decks and diverting all excess reactor power into the main weapon systems. The starfire cannons were an ancient human weapon designed not to damage, but to annihilate. As the first Leviathan lunged toward the Goliath, its massive limbs reaching out to crush the ship, the forward cannon fired. A sphere of white-gold energy burst from the Goliath's prow, expanding rapidly until it was almost as wide as the Leviathan itself. When it struck, there was no explosion, only a sudden blinding flash as the creature's armored body was erased from existence, every molecule torn apart and scattered into the void. The remaining Leviathans roared in fury and charged. The Goliath's engines flared, dodging one swipe and sliding under another as the side-mounted starfire cannons came online. Twin blasts tore through a second Leviathan, its limbs writhing as it died. The third struck from above, its massive jaws snapping shut on the Goliath's midsection, but the human ship's armor held. Turrets along the hull spun and fired point blank, blasting through the creature's mouth until its head split apart. The crew moved without fear, their voices steady, their hands sure. Every impact on the hull was met with counterfire. Every enemy advance was met with calculated destruction. And still more Devourer ships poured into the fight, their numbers seeming endless. Vance's eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical map. "We're not here to kill them all," she said quietly. "We're here to break them." She turned to her weapons chief. "Prepare the Rift Lance." The Rift Lance was the Goliath's most dangerous weapon, a device that tore open a wound in space itself, pulling anything nearby into the crushing grip of a newborn singularity. It had been outlawed by the Council centuries ago for being too destructive, but humans had never cared for the Council's rules. As the Rift Lance powered up, the swarm seemed to sense the danger. Ships broke formation, moving to escape the weapon's range. But Vance had already calculated the perfect shot. "Fire," she said. Space in front of the Goliath twisted violently, light bending and warping around a point of impossible darkness. The singularity roared to life, its pull dragging dozens, then hundreds of Devourer ships toward it. Some tried to flee, but their own momentum betrayed them, pulling them into the event horizon where they were crushed into nothing. Even fragments of destroyed ships were dragged in, until the singularity collapsed in on itself with a final burst of energy that shattered what remained of the swarm's forward line. The path to the Queen was open. On the council feed, stunned silence filled the chamber. No one spoke. No one moved. They had just watched a single human ship tear apart the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, and it had done so with terrifying precision. But Vance knew the battle was not over. The Queen was still ahead, her hive ships still defending her, and humans did not stop until the enemy was gone forever. "Full speed ahead," Vance ordered, her voice like steel. "We finish this." The Goliath's engines roared once more, and the massive warship plunged into the darkness toward the heart of the swarm, its weapons blazing like a second sun. The Goliath plunged deeper into the swarm's territory, its engines burning hotter than ever as it tore through the darkness like a blade through flesh, and every alien eye watching from distant systems felt a cold fear settle in their hearts. Because they realized humanity was not just fighting to survive anymore, they were hunting. Admiral Cara Vance stood on the command deck with her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes fixed on the tactical map where the Queen's hive loomed ahead. A monstrous sphere of living matter the size of a planet, its surface crawling with spires and weapons that reached into space like claws. Around it swirled the last and strongest of the Devourer fleet. Thousands of hive ships packed so tightly they almost formed a shell, their weapons flaring as they detected the human warship. But the Goliath did not slow. It accelerated, diving headlong into the closing wall of enemies. The first wave struck with a fury meant to crush, but they were met with a storm of railgun fire and missile barrages that shredded their bodies and tore holes in their formations. Chunks of burning wreckage spun away, colliding with other ships and creating chain reactions of destruction. Yet the swarm kept coming, determined to protect their queen at any cost. Vance's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Starboard turrets, fire at will. Port batteries, keep the flank clear. Forward beam, target their heavy ships." Her crew moved like parts of a single machine. There was no hesitation, no wasted movement. Each order was obeyed instantly, and every shot struck true. The Goliath's hull glowed from near misses and impacts, but its layered armor held strong. Inside the hive, the Queen screamed, her mind reaching out to every surviving ship, flooding them with rage and desperation. She could feel the predator drawing closer, and in her mind, she understood something the Council had never believed, that humans were not prey. They were something far worse. The swarm shifted tactics, no longer rushing blindly, but surrounding from all sides, trying to drag the Goliath into a killing zone, but Vance anticipated it. "Bring the plasma lances online, arc fire across the formation." The lances fired, blue-white streams of burning energy sweeping across the swarm like scythes, cutting through dozens of ships at once. Enemy vessels burned from the inside out, their organic hulls curling and blackening before bursting apart. But the Queen's guard ships closed in, their massive bodies blocking the Goliath's advance. These were the Hive Titans, larger and stronger than normal Hive ships, armored with layers of biometal that could resist most weapons. But humans had never relied on most weapons. Vance ordered the forward missile racks to fire the Hellpiercers, long black warheads designed to bore through armor and detonate. Deep inside the target, the Titans tried to scatter, but the missiles were too fast and too smart, each one slamming into its target and tunneling through before exploding, tearing the ships apart from within. The path ahead began to open, and through the gaps the Queen's hive was visible, its surface glowing with defensive fire as it prepared for the final fight. "All power to forward shields, ignore the sides. We punch straight through," Vance commanded. The Goliath's reactors roared. The hull trembled under the strain, but the ship surged forward like a beast smelling blood. Alien fire slammed into the shields, lighting the void with brilliant flares. Yet the human warship refused to stop. The Goliath plowed through the last line of defense, railguns pounding, beams slicing, until the hive filled the entire view, its vast surface alive with movement. The Queen herself watching through 1,000 eyes. And then Vance gave the order that sealed the fate of the Devourers forever. Deploy the Wrath of Earth. Deep within the Goliath, hidden chambers opened to reveal humanity's most terrible weapon, a swarm of autonomous hunter drones armed. With micro-singularity warheads, once released, they could not be called back. They were designed to search, find, and erase every trace of the enemy. They burst from the warship in all directions, streaking toward the hive. Some were intercepted by the Queen's defenses, but for every one destroyed, 10 slipped through, diving into tunnels, tearing through walls, planting their deadly payloads. Explosions ripped across the hive's surface. Massive fireballs and collapsing structures turning the living planet into a sea of destruction. The Queen's scream shook the minds of her remaining children. But there was no mercy left in the hearts of the humans. This was not a war anymore. It was an extermination. The hive's defenses fell apart. Its weapons went silent. Its great spires collapsed into the boiling surface. The Goliath kept firing until the sensors reported no more enemy signals. In the council chamber, alien leaders stared in stunned silence as the live feed showed the once mighty hive breaking apart, molten rivers spilling into the void, and at the center, the Queen's body burned until there was nothing left but drifting ash. Admiral Vance stood unmoving, her voice calm but carrying an edge that sent chills down even her own crew. "No survivors!" The Goliath turned slowly, scanning for any escape ships, and everyone it found was hunted down and destroyed. In the farthest corners of the galaxy, devourer drones that had been feeding on other worlds suddenly froze as the hive-mind connection died, their minds going dark forever. The threat that had consumed entire civilizations was gone in a single day, and the galaxy was silent. But Vance knew the silence would not last. Already she could feel the eyes of the Council and the other great powers watching, weighing what humanity had just done, because if they could destroy the Devourers, they could destroy anything. The Goliath's weapons powered down, but its presence was as heavy as ever. The warship turned toward the nearest Council outpost, and Vance's final order was as cold as the void around them. "Set course, maximum speed, we have a message to deliver." And somewhere deep in the hearts of those who had watched the battle, a new fear began to grow. The fear that the Deathworlders had not just saved the galaxy, they had claimed it. The Goliath cut through the void like a silent predator, its hull still scorched from the battle, but every system running at full power. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, and no one spoke unless it was necessary. The weight of what they had done hung in the air, but so did something else. Purpose. Admiral Cara Vance stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes locked on the massive holographic projection of the Council's central station, a colossal ring world orbiting a blue giant star. It was the heart of galactic politics, home to representatives from hundreds of species, a place where power was traded with words and promises. But Vance was not coming for words, she was coming for silence, the kind that follows fear. The Council had summoned her, not with a request, but a demand. Their message was polite on the surface, but carried the weight of authority. They wanted answers for the destruction of the Devourer hive, for the use of weapons forbidden by ancient treaties. But more than anything, they wanted to remind humanity of its place in the galaxy. Vance had no intention of being reminded of anything. As the station grew larger in the viewport, the Goliath slowed, but only slightly. Its sheer size and weapon profile made the station's defensive fleets scramble into position, lines of alien warships forming a wall between the human ship and the ring world, their weapons powered but not yet aimed. The Council thought they were showing strength, but to the humans watching from the Goliath's bridge, it was nothing more than a delaying tactic. "Open a channel," Vance ordered, her voice calm. The comms officer nodded, and within seconds the faces of hundreds of alien leaders filled the projection around the bridge, some masked in ceremonial armor, others bare-faced with expressions of arrogance or unease. The council speaker, an elder, of the crystalline Valor, leaned forward, his voice echoing with authority. "Admiral Vance of Earth, you are summoned to answer for your people's violation of the Mutual Defense and Conduct Accords. You have deployed weapons that no civilized race would dare to use. You have exterminated an entire species without offering them a path of surrender. Explain yourselves or face sanctions." There was a murmur of agreement among the others. Vance did not flinch. "We saved your galaxy," she said simply, her words cutting through the noise. "While you argued in chambers, worlds were burning. While you debated acceptable force, entire civilizations vanished. The Devourers were not an enemy you could negotiate with. They were a plague. And Earth does not negotiate with plagues." Her tone sharpened. "We acted because you would not." The speaker's crystal body glimmered with rising tension. "You acted beyond your authority. You brought weapons into this galaxy that break the balance of power. This cannot be allowed." Vance let the silence hang for a moment before stepping closer to the hollow projector, her face filling the view for every council member. "The balance of power broke the day the Devourers were allowed to exist," she said. "And now there is a new balance. You will not threaten Earth, and you will not dictate our defense." The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices, some shouting outrage, others whispering unease. But Vance raised her hand and gestured to her comms officer. "Show them," she ordered. On every display in the chamber and in every ship near the station, the view changed to a replay of the final moments of the Hive, captured from the Goliath's sensors. They watched as the Wrath of Earth drones tore through the Queen's planet, watched as the massive Hive world cracked and burned until nothing was left but drifting ash. And then came the sound. The single final scream of the Queen as the Hive mind collapsed. The station fell silent. No one dared speak. Vance's voice was steady but colder now. "That was one ship," she said. "One human ship. If Earth chose to build more, there would be no corner of this galaxy where our enemies could hide. Think about that before you speak of sanctions." Some of the council members looked away. Others met her gaze with defiance, but none spoke first. It was the speaker who finally said, "You would threaten us?" Vance shook her head slowly. "No, I do not threaten. I promise. Earth has no interest in conquest. But if anyone moves against us, we will respond without hesitation. The Devourers are gone because we made sure they would never return. The same can be true for any threat." She glanced toward her tactical officer. "Transmit the secondary file." The council members frowned as new data appeared in front of them. It was a list of every known Devourer drone, egg cluster, and hidden nursery across the galaxy, and next to each entry was a status reading, "Destroyed." "We have been working while you've been talking," Vance said. "There are no survivors, no remnants. The threat is over. You can thank us, or you can fear us, but you will not control us." The speaker's voice was quieter now. "And if we decide humanity is too dangerous," Vance leaned in, her words slow and deliberate, "then you will learn exactly how dangerous we can be." For a long moment, no one in the chamber spoke. Then the channel cut, leaving only the image of the massive station in the viewport. The alien fleets held their positions, but did not fire. The Goliath waited, its weapons fully powered. Vance stood on the bridge, her crew silent behind her, and then the comms officer reported, "Message from the council. They will review the matter and issue a decision at a later time." Vance smirked faintly. "Good. That gives them time to think." She turned to her helm officer. "Set a slow orbit. Keep our weapons hot. Let them feel us here." And so the Goliath hung in space like a shadow over the council's heart. A reminder to every species watching that humanity was no longer a small voice at the table. They were the hand that could flip the table over entirely, and somewhere deep within the ring world, alien leaders whispered the same quiet truth to themselves. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Goliath remained in silent orbit around the Council's ring world for 3 standard days, its massive frame casting a shadow over the hub of galactic politics. Every alien ship that passed by kept its weapons cold. Every patrol altered course to give the human warship a wide berth. And still the Council had not delivered a decision. To most species, this silence meant diplomacy was at work. But to Admiral Caravance, it meant something else entirely. It meant fear was beginning to crack into anger, and anger often birthed rebellion. Deep within the Council's private chambers, away from the official broadcasts, whispers had begun to spread, small clusters of delegates meeting in shadowed corridors or encrypted channels. They spoke of the human problem, how Earth's sudden rise from a backwater world to the destroyer of galactic threats had shattered the delicate web of power. To some, this was unacceptable. The Trellari Syndicate was the first to speak openly among themselves, their tall, insectoid leaders pacing in frustration. "They do not respect the Council's authority," one hissed. "If we allow this, soon they will dictate the laws themselves." Others nodded. The Vexar Dominion's reptilian warlords joined in agreement, their voices deep and rumbling. "They act without permission, without fear of consequence. This is dangerous." The plan was simple at first. Gather enough support to form a coalition, pressure Earth with trade sanctions, blockade their colonies, and, if necessary, build fleets to rival their warships. But even in these secret talks, the fear was obvious. Because every species in the room had seen the destruction of the Devourer hive, every one of them had heard the Queen's final scream echo through the galaxy. Still, pride is a dangerous thing. And so the whispers grew louder. Ships began moving, quietly between Allied territories, carrying diplomats and military advisors. Encrypted messages raced through hidden channels. Maps of human colonies and fleet positions appeared on secure tables, but nothing stayed hidden for long. The humans had ears everywhere now. Earth's intelligence directorate had agents embedded in dozens of alien governments, and within 2 days Admiral Vance had a complete report of the growing conspiracy. She stood in her ready room, staring at the names and signatures of every leader involved. Her first instinct was to strike immediately, to dismantle their fleets before they could even meet, but instead she smiled, because she knew something they did not. Fear worked better when it was fed slowly. On the 3rd night of plotting, the conspirators met in the underground chamber of a neutral moon, a place shielded from scans and deep in Trellari territory. They thought themselves safe, but as they argued over strategies and numbers, the lights flickered, and a deep vibration rolled through the floor. The chamber doors sealed without warning. One by one, hollow projectors activated, and the air filled with a towering image of Admiral Vance, her expression unreadable. "You speak of rebellion," her voice filled every corner of the room. "You speak of breaking the balance again, of moving against Earth, of threatening our people." Some of the aliens tried to cut the connection, but the controls were dead. "I am not here to demand your loyalty," she continued. "I am here to remind you of your choices. You have 3 paths ahead. Live in peace under your own laws. Work with us to ensure threats like the Devourers never return, or choose war." Her image leaned closer, her eyes cold. "If you choose the 3rd path, I promise you will not see the end coming." The image vanished, the lights returned, and the chamber doors unlocked. No one spoke for several moments, until the Vexar warlord growled. "They know everything we do," the Trellari leader hissed. "Back." Then we must move faster, but speed was already impossible, because as they discovered hours later, half their planned routes were blocked by sudden navigation accidents. Trade lanes jammed with human-escorted convoys, communication, relays mysteriously overloaded, and intelligence officers disappearing without trace. In less than a week, the conspiracy had been cut in half, not with weapons, but with quiet, surgical precision. Yet the core members still clung to the idea of resistance, their pride refusing. To surrender on the Goliath, Vance watched the remaining factions struggle and weighed her options. Striking them now would be easy, but letting them linger would send a stronger message. That Earth could see them, could touch them, could choke their plans without ever firing a shot. "Keep the pressure low but constant," she told her officers. "Let them destroy their own trust in each other." And it worked. The Trellari began accusing the Vexar of leaking information. The Vexar accused the Syndicate of cowardice. Old grudges resurfaced, and within days their meetings dissolved into shouting matches. Meanwhile, human envoys visited neutral worlds, speaking not of dominance, but of cooperation, promising mutual defense treaties, offering trade benefits, always reminding others that Earth acted when no one else would. Soon smaller powers began drifting toward humanity's side, not out of love, but out of the certainty that opposing them was suicide. By the end of the second week, the conspiracy still existed, but it was limping, fractured, and paranoid. Vance knew it would not die quietly, and that made her keep one hand on the sword, for in the depths of the Trellari capital, a message was sent to an unknown location beyond charted space. A call for aid, not to any known species, but to something older, something the Council had buried in its archives and sworn never to awaken. The sender spoke only 6 words into the dark. The Deathworlders must be destroyed, and somewhere far beyond the rim, something answered. Beyond the farthest edges of the mapped galaxy, where even the Council's star charts faded into blank darkness, there was a place the oldest records called the Silent Reach, a void where no ships returned and no signals ever came back. It was there that the Trellari message arrived, carried by a pulse of compressed code through ancient relay gates no one alive remembered building. The signal sank into the shadows and vanished for 3 standard days. Then, without warning, something replied. A deep and slow pulse that was not made of sound, but of pure gravitational distortion. Sensors on the outermost human deep-range probes screamed as their readings spiked into impossible numbers, and then went silent in the heart of Trellari space. The conspirators who had sent the message gathered in a hidden bunker, their faces tense, their voices hushed, and then the air itself seemed to grow heavier. A shimmering form emerged in the center of their chamber, tall, featureless, and made entirely of shifting black light. No mouth moved, but they all heard the voice inside their heads. "We remember the Deathworlders," it said, each word pressing like a weight against their thoughts. "We remember the war you do not speak of," the Trellari leader forced his voice steady. "Earth has grown too strong. They act outside the Council. But the shadow cut him off. "They act as they did before, when they burned our kind from the stars." The conspirators exchanged confused glances. None of them knew such a war had ever happened. "You will bring us to them," the shadow commanded, "and we will end them, as they once tried to end us." In orbit above a human colony near the rim, the Goliath's long-range sensors picked up faint disturbances, nothing large enough to be a ship, more like space itself bending. Admiral Kara Vance stared at the readings, her instincts screaming that this was not natural. "Send drones," she ordered, but the first wave vanished before even transmitting back a single image in the following hours. Dozens of colonies across the outer rim began reporting strange disappearances, ships going off course and never reappearing, stations losing power as if the stars themselves had dimmed, and then, in one sector, a human listening post caught a brief transmission. It was only 3 seconds long, but the voice that came through was cold and alien. "We are coming." By the time the message reached Vance, she had already doubled patrols and recalled scout ships, but something in her chest told her it would not be enough. In the Council's secure chambers, rumors spread that the Trellari had been seen moving fleets in strange patterns, that they were meeting with an ally no one had ever heard of, but none of the Council leaders would confirm it. Fear was a shadow in the room now, and it was growing darker each day. The first confirmed sighting came when a Vexar patrol ship in deep space stumbled upon an object the size of a moon, drifting silently between systems. It was no asteroid. It was a vessel, black as the void, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when looked at. Before the patrol could flee, a pulse of dark energy erupted from the vessel, and every crew member aboard simply ceased to exist. Their bodies left intact, but their minds erased. News of this event never reached the public because the Vexar sealed the reports, but the humans did not need the Vexar's word. Earth's own deep surveillance network caught the same vessel days later, moving closer to inhabited space. Vance gathered her senior officers, the holomap showing the slow but steady approach. "This is not a warship we understand," she told them. "This is something older. Something built for a kind of war we've never fought." When her intelligence chief asked how she knew, she answered simply, "Because it's not coming for territory, it's coming for us." As the alien vessel advanced, strange gravitational ripples began to affect nearby systems. Moons shifted in orbit, comet paths bent. Even the flow of light seemed to warp near it. Panic began to ripple through the outer colonies, and human refugee ships started arriving at core worlds, telling stories of stars that went dark for hours and shadows that moved against the light. Vance knew that if fear spread too fast, the Council might fracture before the real fight even began. So she sent out a broadcast across every human channel, her voice steady. "We have faced extinction before. We have faced enemies who thought us weak, and we have stood. This time will be no different. We will hold the line." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth. The thing in the void was unlike anything they had faced, and it was not alone. Because new readings showed smaller shadow ships emerging from the same sector, each moving in perfect synchronization with the moon-sized vessel. On the Trellari homeworld, the conspirators watched the shadows arrive in their orbit, expecting their new allies to speak, to plan the strike against Earth. But instead, the black shapes simply drifted, dozens of them, their surfaces absorbing all light, and then without warning, one of them fired a beam of pure darkness into the planet's surface, a beam that left no explosion, no crater, only an empty void where cities had once been. The conspirators screamed in horror, realizing too late that they had invited something into the galaxy that served only itself. As panic erupted, the Shadow's voice returned to them. "We take what we wish." And with that, the Trellari capital fell silent forever. When news of the Trellari's sudden destruction reached the Goliath, Vance felt the weight of inevitability settle on her shoulders. This was no longer a political war, no longer a struggle for dominance within the Council. This was survival, pure and final. She turned to her officers and gave the order none of them wanted to hear. "Prepare every fleet. Recall every ship. Put every colony on high alert, because they're not coming for the Trellari anymore, they're coming for us all." The sky above Earth's fleet was alive with light, but it was not the light of stars, it was the reflection of thousands of human warships gathered in a defensive wall around Sol. Every ship, from the smallest patrol craft to the colossal planetary. Defense carriers stood ready. The air in the Goliath's command deck was tense. Officers moved with precise speed, voices calm but their eyes heavy with the knowledge that this could be the last day humanity would see the sun. Admiral Cara Vance stood in the center, her gaze fixed on the tactical hologram. In the black beyond Pluto's orbit, they were coming. The Shadow Fleet. Hundreds of void black ships moving in perfect silence. Their moon-sized leader at the center, warping space around it so violently that even the light of distant stars bent away. Humanity had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that destroyed not for conquest but for hunger. As the Shadow Fleet closed in, smaller black vessels split from the main formation, darting ahead like hunting predators. Human defense lines. Open fire first. The dark of space erupted with beams of white plasma, kinetic slugs and nuclear bursts. But the shadow ships seemed to absorb the light, their surfaces swallowing energy and bending every attack away. One human battleship, the Valiant, pushed forward in a desperate charge, firing everything it had, but a single pulse from the enemy tore through it without sound, leaving nothing but drifting fragments. Vance knew they could not win in a direct exchange. "Execute Hammerfall," she ordered. The command spread instantly, and from hidden positions in the asteroid belt, massive railgun platforms powered up, firing tungsten rods at near-light speed. The impact struck one of the smaller shadow ships, and for the first time, something in the enemy cracked. A ripple of black light shuddered through it before it imploded into nothing. Cheers erupted across the comms, but it was short-lived. The shadows adapted, twisting their shapes to shield. Themselves, the battle turned into chaos. Entire squadrons vanishing under waves of darkness that rolled out from the enemy like storms. In the middle of the carnage, Vance received a secure transmission from Earth Command. They had finished preparing the Leviathan Protocol, an untested weapon built in secret for decades, deep in the core of Saturn's moon Enceladus. It was a planetary-scale graviton destabilizer, designed not to kill ships, but to collapse a region of space itself, trapping anything inside forever. Using it meant sealing off the Sol system from the galaxy, no ships in, no ships out. Vance's chest tightened. Activating it would save humanity, but cut them off from every colony, every world beyond. "If we don't, there won't be a humanity left to cut off," she said. The Shadow Fleet was closing now, their leader's presence bending space so violently that navigation systems screamed with errors. Ships began to collide, human fighters sacrificing themselves to ram into enemy hulls, and still the shadows came. Vance ordered the fleet to fall back to the Enceladus line. Buying time for the weapon to charge, the enemy followed, confident, their black forms swallowing the light of Sol itself as they approached. And then something unexpected happened. As they entered the inner system, the shadows slowed, their movements no longer perfect, their formations breaking slightly. Science officers on the Goliath realized the truth. The closer they came to Sol, the weaker they became, as if the human home star itself was burning against them. Vance seized the chance. All ships push forward, drive them toward the core. The humans surged back into the fight, exploiting every stagger and break in the enemy's motion, the Goliath itself leading the charge, slamming a barrage of kinetic fire into the enemy leader's hull. For a moment, the massive shadow reeled, but then it unleashed a pulse so powerful that 3 carriers simply vanished from existence. Vance knew they could not destroy it here. "Fire the Leviathan," she ordered. Deep under Enceladus's ice, the colossal machine roared to life. Invisible waves spreading through the void. Reality itself beginning to twist. The effect started small, then grew. Space around the Shadow Fleet began to fold inward, their ships flickering as if struggling to exist. The smaller ones broke first, torn apart into streams of black mist. The larger ones fought to escape, but the pull was too strong. The leader turned, its shape shifting into something monstrous and vast, its voice echoing not in the comms but in every human mind. "You cannot hide forever, Deathworlders," it said. But its form was already being dragged into the collapsing space, twisting and breaking into nothing. One by one, the shadows were consumed until the void fell still. The hologram cleared, and for the first time in hours there was no enemy reading, only silence. The Sol system was safe, but the price was clear. The Leviathan's activation had sealed them in. No jump gates would work, no ships could leave or enter. Humanity was alone now, cut off from every world they had built. Vance stood on the command deck, staring at the sun, knowing they had saved their home but left the rest of their people in the galaxy to face the darkness alone. In the quiet that followed, she gave the order to stand down, and the battered fleet began its slow return to Earth, across the stars beyond their reach. The galaxy would not know what had happened here, only that the Deathworlders had vanished behind a wall of silence, and somewhere, in the deep places between galaxies, something that had been pulled into the Leviathan's trap whispered in the dark, waiting, remembering, and promising that one day it would find a way back.